In the last 2 centuries, English language has developed into a global language. English language teaching profession has played a significant role in this development. In this module, we'll discuss the role English language has played historically in the development of English. English transformed from a language of a handful of nations into a language used by millions of people around the world. This transformation of English resulted in the emergence of a number of varieties. Some people looked at these varieties as a result of the incorrect or faulty use of English by the learners in countries which were not native English speaking countries, the countries which we refer to as outer expanding circle countries. Whereas other people with a more accepting and more liberal point of view, they looked at these varieties as the natural outcome of the use of a language far from its place of origin in new contexts, and the use of English to perform functions which were unique to the new context, the functions which the English language had not performed in the past. But because of the point of view that these varieties were a result of the faulty use of English, there has been a resistance to the acceptance of these varieties and the spread of English in this way. Despite the fact that English is no longer limited to its native English context and therefore not dominated, in that sense, not dominated by the native English context, the native English or the native English context, let's say, continues to dominate English ideologically, which means that still there are people who believe that, who strongly believe in the ideology which is adhered to or promoted by those who speak English. In this way, the influence of native speakers of English has been felt on the ELT profession as well. This ideological influence on the world, let's say, or all those who are interested in English language, they have been influenced by they have been ideologically influenced by the native English speakers, and the same influence is felt by the ELT profession as well. So it is felt that linguistic imperialism is not really caused by the teaching of English. For example, if English is taught all around the world and lots of people are interested in learning English, that is not what causes linguistic imperialism or the dominance of English over other languages or the imposition of English on other languages. What causes linguistic imperialism actually is the teaching of a particular variety of English, that is either the UK variety or the US variety. In this way, these varieties are given dominance over other varieties, and it is actually this importance, this undue importance, which is given to these varieties, which causes linguistic imperialism, and not only the interest that people show in English or the teaching of English globally. There's also a historical link between ELT methodology and British colonialism. British colonialism, which started in the 18th century in Asia and Africa. So we see a close link between this colonialism and English language teaching profession, because wherever the colonists went, they introduced their language in those regions. So ELT is seen as a product of spread of English, that is colonialism, and the macro acquisition of English. So the combination of these two aspects or these two factors, the spread of English, that is through colonialism, and the macro acquisition of English. Before we continue, let's take a look at what we mean by macro acquisition. Macro acquisition is defined as the acquisition of a common second language, for example, English, by speakers of different mother tongues. For example, if we do not look at the world generally and only limit our focus to Pakistan, we see that people who have different mother tongues, for example, Punjabis, Hindi, Urdu, etc., they all learn a common second language, that is English. So that amounts to macro acquisition of English. In a macro acquisition situation, the primary input of the target language does not come from native speakers. As we see in the case of English, the primary input in terms of language teaching comes from not native English speakers but non-native English speakers. For example, in Pakistan, we have Pakistani and proficient Pakistani English language teachers who teach English. Also, in a macro acquisition context of language learning, the language, its lexicon, its idioms are transformed and they are defined by their own lexicon. For example, the new context will define the lexicon differently from the original context of the language, as I have already said, because of the unique circumstances in which the language is then used. For example, the new functions that the language performs, which it has not performed in the past. So, macro acquisition is also defined by its own lexicon, idioms, and also transformed meanings. The meanings which are transformed, the meanings in the target language, which are transformed as a result of the use of the words in a new context and for newer functions and purposes. So we see that development of English language teaching is not a result of migration of English-speaking population to North America and Australia, as in the beginning, many people from Britain and also from Britain actually migrated to America and also Australia. ELT is not a result of immigration of people into the UK or USA either. So it is not, it is neither, ELT is neither a result of the importing of English into the USA, importing of people into the UK or USA, or the exporting out of the UK or USA to other countries. It is not a result of either of these phenomena. ELT, the development of ELT theories and practices did not really develop in the UK or USA. If we believe that there has been a lot of immigration to UK and USA, therefore UK and USA are the right context for the development of ELT theories and practices, or because a large number of people migrated to the UK, from the UK into the USA, therefore USA is the right country for the development of these theories and practices. That's a misconception. The fact is that it was the colonies. Historically, it was the British colonies which were the central testing ground for these theories and practices, and which played the most significant role in the development of ELT, because the largest number of people who started learning English were from these colonies. So the practices and the theories of English language teaching did not develop in any of the native English speaking countries, but in these British colonies, which were all non-native English speaking.